Clara Aldridge crawled, hands and knees on frozen wood, her valise split open behind her, her mother's Bible face down in the snow, and the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry, already climbing into a wagon with a blonde woman pressed against his shoulder like she'd been there all along. He didn't look back, not once. The station master watched through his window. Two women with market baskets stopped and stared. Nobody moved to help. Nobody said a word. Clara's fingers were turning blue. She couldn't feel her knees anymore. $14 in her pocket, no return ticket, and a lie buried in her chest like a bullet she'd swallowed whole. That was the day she died, and the day she started living. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow Clara's journey all the way to the end. Tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far her story reaches. Now settle in. This one's going to stay with you a long time. The 4:15 westbound from Cheyenne was 40 minutes late on account of the snow. Clara Aldridge stepped off the train and onto a platform that nobody was waiting on. She stood there, gripping a leather valise held together with twine and stubbornness. Inside it, 2 spare dresses, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and 11 letters from a man named Ward Calloway, who'd written things like, "I value character above all," and "I believe we could build something worth having." She'd believed him. That was her first mistake. 20 minutes she stood in that cold. Not Boston cold. Boston cold had walls and corners and somewhere to duck into. This cold was open, endless, the kind that didn't negotiate. It just took. The wagon appeared at the end of the road. 2 bays pulling it, steam rising off their coats. The driver sat tall, hat low, and beside him, shoulder to shoulder, close as kin, a woman in green velvet with blonde curls and a bonnet that cost more than Clara earned in 3 months stitching shirts. Clara's hands stopped shaking. That was the strange thing. The trembling she'd carried for 3 days on that train just stopped, replaced by something colder than the weather. The wagon pulled up. Ward Calloway climbed down and got his first look at the woman he'd been writing love letters to for 6 months. He was handsome. She'd give him that and nothing else. "Miss Aldridge." "Mr. Calloway, I owe you an explanation." "You owe me a lot more than that, but go ahead." He flinched. "Good. Miss Locke arrived from Cheyenne 3 days ago. Her father's a businessman with connections. When I met her in person, I realized she and I had more in common 3 days ago." "Pardon?" "She arrived 3 days ago. My train left Cheyenne Tuesday morning. The telegraph office there was open. I walked past it." Clara watched the color drain from his face. "You could have stopped me, Ward. You chose not to." "The situation was complicated." "No, it wasn't. You looked at her, and you looked at my letters, and you did the math. She's younger. She's prettier. Her daddy's got money." Clara's voice didn't waver. "That's not complicated. That's just cowardice with good penmanship." From the wagon, Miss Locke turned. Blue eyes, a small smile. The kind women wore when they'd won something they wanted everyone to know about. Ward reached into his coat. Bills, folded tight. "For your trouble. $60. Train fare and lodging while you—" "No." "Miss Aldridge, I said no." She looked at his hand, at the money in it, at the easy way he thought he could buy his way out of this. "I came here on my own, Mr. Calloway. I don't need you to send me back. Please, I insist. And I decline." She held his eyes until he dropped his. "You made your choice. Now live with it. I intend to live with mine." Ward set the money on the bench beside her valise, settled his hat. nodded once like a man who'd just finished unpleasant business and was glad to be done. She watched him climb back up, watched Miss Locke lean in and whisper something, watched the wagon pull away until there was nothing left but wheel tracks filling with snow. Then Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard on that bench, and the shaking came back twice as bad. Her whole body trembled, knees to teeth, so violent she had to press her hands flat against her thighs and push until the bones ached. 31 years old, 2,000 miles from Boston, $14. No ticket home, no job, no plan. The station master had disappeared. The two women with market baskets were whispering behind their hands, stealing glances like Clara was a show put on for their entertainment. She would not cry. She'd buried her mother at 16, her father at 14, raised her brother Samuel on bread crusts and charity soup, and she had not cried then. She would not start now for a man who wasn't worth the ink he'd written with. So she sat, spine straight, eyes forward, breathing. "Ma'am?" She almost didn't turn. Another man with another opinion about what she ought to do was the last thing she needed. But the voice was different. Quiet, not pushing into her space, but standing at the edge of it, waiting to be let in. He stood near the freight office beside a loaded wagon. Tall, taller than Ward, broader through the chest, with dark hair going silver at the temples, and a face that looked like it had been carved by weather and hard use. A scar crossed the bridge of his nose, small but visible. His hands were rough, even at a distance. But his eyes, blue-gray, the color of a winter sky about to break open, looking at her with something that wasn't pity and wasn't curiosity. Something steadier. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said. "I apologize for that." "Then stop overhearing." "Fair enough. But it's 9 degrees and dropping, and that shawl's not going to keep you alive past dark." "I'm fine." "No, ma'am, you're not, and we both know it." Clara looked at him. Really looked. Searching for the angle, the catch, the thing men always wanted when they offered help to women who had nothing. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want a housekeeper." He said it flat, no decoration. "My name's Elijah Dawson. Eli. I run Copper Ridge Ranch, 9 miles north. My last housekeeper married a man in Laramie and left 2 months ago. Since then, my children have been living on burned oatmeal and my foreman's cooking, which I'm fairly sure violates several laws of God and man." "You have children?" "3. Lucy's 12, Thomas is 9, Rosie's 5. His voice changed when he said their names, went softer at the edges, then caught itself and hardened again, like a man who'd shown more than he meant to. "Their mother passed 5 years ago. Winter fever." "I'm sorry." $25 a month, room and board. You cook for the hands, manage the house, help with the children. It doesn't suit? I drive you back to town and pay your fare east. No strings. That's a generous offer for a woman you watched get thrown away 5 minutes ago. Something moved in those gray-blue eyes. I didn't see a woman getting thrown away. I saw a woman getting set free from a man too stupid to know what he had. Clara stared at him. In 31 years, no one had ever described her situation as freedom. It had always been loss, lack, the absence of something she was supposed to have. Never a door opening, always a door slamming shut. "Can you cook?" he asked. "Can you learn?" she shot back, dodging the question. "I asked first, and I asked better." That almost smile again. "Fair enough. Yes or no, Miss Aldridge? The snow's getting worse." "Yes." She reached for her valise. Eli picked it up first, quick but not grabbing, the way a man handled something that belonged to someone else. "The money on the bench," he said. "That's yours." Clara looked at Ward's $60. Pride screamed, "Leave it." But Samuel hadn't raised himself. She'd done that on 14-hour days and empty stomachs, and the understanding that pride was a luxury poor women couldn't afford. She took the money, didn't count it, didn't thank Ward for it, even in her mind. "Smart," Eli said, and walked toward his wagon. They rode in silence for a while, which Clara was grateful for. The snow fell thick, covering everything, and the only sounds were hooves and wheels and the creak of cold wood. "Your wife," Clara said after a mile. "What was her name?" "Hannah." "How'd she die?" Most men would have flinched at the directness. Eli just drove. "Pneumonia, bad winter, worse than this one. She caught it nursing the Pratt family's children through scarlet fever. Saved every one of those kids. Couldn't save herself." "She sounds brave." "She was the best person I ever knew." His jaw tightened. "Rosie was 6 months old. Doesn't remember her at all. Tommy remembers some. Lucy remembers everything." "And you?" Eli was quiet long enough that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I remember too much." The ranch appeared below them when they crested a rise. White house, dark shutters, smoke from the chimney. A barn, solid and square. Cattle shapes in the snow. The front door opened before the wagon stopped. A girl stood in the doorway. 12 years old, blonde hair pulled tight, blue eyes that could have been beautiful if they weren't so furious. She looked at Clara the way you'd look at a snake you'd found in your kitchen. "Who's that?" Lucy said. "Miss Aldridge. She's our new housekeeper." "We don't need a housekeeper." "Lucy. Mrs. Pratt left because this place runs people off. Mrs. Chen before her, same thing. How long you think this one lasts?" Clara climbed down from the wagon before Eli could help her. She walked to the bottom of the porch steps and looked up at this child who was trying so hard to be a wall. "Your father offered me a job," Clara said. "I took it. That's between him and me. It has nothing to do with replacing anyone, least of all your mother. Don't talk about my mother." "I won't, unless you want me to." "I won't ever want you to." "Then I won't ever bring it up." They stared at each other. Snow collected on Clara's shoulders, in her hair. Lucy stood dry in the doorway, and the distance between them was more than 3 porch steps. "I don't need a new mother," Lucy said, "and neither do Tommy and Rosie." "Good, because I'm a terrible mother. I've never been one. I'm here to cook and clean, and right now I can barely do either of those. So you've got nothing to worry about." Something flickered behind those blue eyes. Not softening, just a pause in the assault. Lucy turned and disappeared inside. Her boots hit the stairs hard enough to rattle the walls, and a door slammed above. Eli exhaled beside her. "I should have warned you." "She's earned the right to be angry." "She's been running this house since she was 7. Cooks for her brother and sister, mends clothes, keeps the place standing. She's not going to let that go easy." "I wouldn't either." A man came around the corner of the barn, moving fast for someone his age. 45 or so, thick through the middle, with a face like a friendly landslide and a mustache that had ambitions beyond its station. "Well now," he said, grinning wide. "Boss finally hired someone who ain't 60 years old and mean as a rattlesnake." He stuck out his hand. "Frank Harlow, ma'am. Foreman. Occasional cook. Full-time disaster." "Clara Aldridge, Miss Aldridge, I want you to know that whatever you make tomorrow morning, even if it's raw flour and creek water, it will be better than what I've been feeding these boys. I made stew last week that Hank's dog wouldn't touch, and that dog eats horse manure." "That's enough, Frank," Eli said, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Just setting expectations low so she can exceed 'em, boss. Smart management, that is." Frank winked at Clara. "Welcome to Copper Ridge, ma'am. We're real glad you're here." She almost smiled. Almost. A boy appeared in the hallway inside. 9 years old, thin, dark hair like his father's, holding the book against his chest like a shield. "Thomas," Eli said, "come say hello." The boy approached slow, watching Clara with eyes too careful for a child. "Hello, ma'am." "Hello, Thomas. What's the book?" He looked down like he'd forgotten he was holding it. "Treasure Island." "First time reading it?" "Third." "What's your favorite part?" The stutter vanished. The apple barrel. When Jim hears Long John Silver's plan and everything changes. One minute, he thinks he knows who everyone is, and the next minute he realizes he's been wrong about all of it. Clara felt that land somewhere deep. Everything can change in 1 minute. I know something about that. Thomas studied her with those serious eyes. "Are you staying?" "For a while." "Lucy doesn't want you here." "I know. She doesn't want anybody here. She thinks if somebody new comes, it means Mama's really gone." The honesty of children. It cut cleaner than any adult's cruelty. "Your Mama is really gone, Thomas. A new person in the kitchen doesn't change that, one way or the other." He nodded slowly, like she'd confirmed something he already knew but needed to hear someone say. Then Rosie came barreling down the hallway, 5 years old, brown curls everywhere, nightgown at 3 in the afternoon. One sock on and one sock gone, to wherever single socks go to die. "Are you the new lady?" "I am." "Can you make pancakes? Papa burns everything, and Lucy won't let me help because I spilled the flour that one time. But it was an accident, and also the cat was involved." "You don't have a cat," Eli said. "I might get one." Clara looked down at this child who was all motion and no brakes, and felt something crack behind her ribs. The last time someone had grabbed her hand this eagerly was Samuel, age 6, pulling her toward a shop window to look at a toy horse they couldn't afford. She swallowed. "I'll try pancakes tomorrow." "Trying's good," Rosie said. She grabbed Clara's hand and pulled. "Come see your room. It's where Mama used to sew. The window faces the mountains, but you can't see them today." Eli watched his youngest daughter drag this stranger into his house. His face did something complicated. Not quite a smile, not quite a flinch. "Don't," he said quietly, and Clara stopped on the stairs. "Don't what?" "Don't promise her things. Rosie gets attached fast. Last housekeeper was here 3 weeks. When she left, Rosie didn't talk for 2 days. His eyes were flat now, closed off. The warmth from the train station gone like it had never existed. "This is a job, Miss Aldridge. You do the work, you get paid. And if you leave clean. No attachments that'll hurt my children when you go." There it was, the wall she'd been waiting for. Every man had one. "I understand," Clara said. "Make sure you do." He turned and walked toward the barn, shoulders rigid, and Clara watched him go, understanding now what she hadn't at the train station. Eli Dawson hadn't hired her out of kindness. He'd hired her out of desperation. And he was already preparing for her to leave. Rosie tugged her hand. "Come on, I'll show you the stove. It's mean, but you can beat it if you're patient." Clara let the child lead her. The kitchen was a wreck. Dishes stacked in the basin, flour on every surface, a cast-iron stove that looked like it hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. And on a shelf near the window, a tin box labeled in careful handwriting, "Hannah's Recipes." Clara's hands shook reaching for it. The last time she'd touched a dead woman's things was clearing out her mother's drawer at 16. 3 hairpins, a comb with missing teeth, a prayer card from St. Anne's. Everything a life fit into one small drawer. She opened the box. Recipe cards, maybe 30, written in a hand that looped and curved like the woman had all the time in the world. Biscuits and gravy, sourdough bread, chicken and dumplings. Instructions that assumed you already knew things Clara didn't. At the bottom of the stack, one card that wasn't a recipe. Clara pulled it out. Different handwriting, shakier, written in pencil instead of ink, like it was scribbled fast. If I don't make it through this winter, Eli will try to shut everyone out. It's what he does. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. Don't let him. The children need more than a closed door. Clara read it twice. Then she put it back at the bottom of the stack, under the recipe for sourdough bread, and closed the lid. 4 a.m, pitch dark, cold enough that her breath hung in the air like smoke. Clara lit the kitchen lamp, faced the stove, and tried to start a fire. First attempt, too little kindling. The flame died like a whispered apology. Second attempt, too much. Smoke poured into the kitchen until she found the damper and wrenched it open, coughing, eyes streaming. Third attempt, the fire caught, held. Clara watched it grow and felt unreasonably proud of something a 7-year-old ranch kid could probably do blindfolded. Pancakes. She'd promised Rosie pancakes. Hannah's card. 2 cups flour, 2 eggs, milk until smooth, pinch of salt. Cook on greased griddle until bubbles form, then flip. What kind of bubbles? How many? How big? The batter came out lumpy. She poured the first pancake. It spread into a shape that resembled no food she'd ever seen. She waited. Poked it. Waited more. The bottom burned while the top stayed raw. The second one tore in half when she tried to flip it. The third one caught fire. Actual fire. Clara was scraping charred batter off the griddle and losing a fight against tears when she heard him behind her. Too much heat. Eli's voice in the dark kitchen. Move the griddle to the cool side. I know that now. And the batter needs more milk. Should pour like... If you say heavy cream, I swear I will throw the spatula at your head. I have never in my life poured heavy cream. Silence. Then, how about like water that's thinking about being thicker? Despite everything, she almost laughed. Almost. I need to tell you something, she said, not turning around. Go ahead. I lied to Ward Calloway. In my letters. I told him I could cook. I can't. I've never cooked a meal, not once. My sister and I grew up on bread and whatever the charity kitchen served. What else? I said I could ride a horse. I'm scared to death of them. What else? I told him I was 27. I'm 31. That it? Isn't that enough? Eli walked to the stove. He took the bowl from her hands, added milk, stirred it smooth in 3 turns, and poured a perfect circle on the griddle. Watch the surface. When the bubbles pop and leave holes that don't fill back in, flip. Wrist, not arm. He flipped. Golden brown. Perfect. Hannah burned everything for 3 months after we married, he said, eyes on the griddle. Salt instead of sugar once. A pie crust so hard, I cracked a tooth on it. Lucy lived on applesauce until Hannah figured out the stove. Really? I ate her first biscuits out of love and nearly died of loyalty. He handed Clara the spatula. You'll learn, but I'm not going to lie to you about something else. What? I don't care that you lied to Calloway. A woman does what she has to. But don't lie to me, not about anything, not ever. I buried a wife. I'm raising 3 children alone. I don't have room in my life for things that aren't true. His eyes were hard. Not cruel, just certain. No more lies, Clara said. Good. Now make a pancake before Rosie wakes up and holds us both accountable." Clara poured, watched bubbles, counted 3 heartbeats after the holes stayed open. Flipped. Wrist, not arm. The pancake landed crooked, brown on one side, pale on the other. But it was whole. "Better," Eli said. "Better," Clara agreed. They worked side by side in the warm kitchen, him pouring coffee, her making pancakes that improved slightly with each attempt. And outside, the snow kept falling, sealing them in, burying the road back to town under drifts that wouldn't melt for months. Rosie arrived first, climbed into her chair, both socks missing now, and stared at her plate. "They're not round." "No." "They're shaped like clouds." "I suppose they are." Rosie took a bite with her fingers, chewed, grinned with 2 missing teeth. "I like clouds." Thomas came down, ate 3 pancakes in silence, then looked up. "Better than Papa's." "That bar is underground," Frank Harlow announced, appearing in the doorway with snow on his hat and a grin splitting his face. "But I'll take it. Miss Aldridge, you just made history. First meal in this house in 2 months that didn't make anyone consider running away." "Sit down and eat, Frank," Eli said. "Don't mind if I do. Don't mind if I do." Frank loaded his plate, took a bite, and pointed his fork at Clara. "Ma'am, these ain't pretty, but they taste like Tuesday after a month of Mondays. You got a gift." "I have a recipe card and blind determination." "Same thing out here." The ranch hands filed in after Frank. Billy Price, 18, all freckles and eagerness. Hank Mueller, quiet, watchful. 2 others whose names Clara caught and filed away. They ate everything she put in front of them and said, "Thank you, ma'am," like it was church. Lucy didn't come down. Clara fixed a plate. Pancakes, 3 of them, the best 3 she'd made. She carried it upstairs and set it outside the closed door. She didn't knock, didn't call out, just left it and walked away. When she came back an hour later to collect the plate, it was empty. Scraped clean, fork placed neatly on top. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but the girl had eaten, and that was ground to stand on. Clara washed dishes until her hands were red. Through the window, she watched Eli cross the yard toward the barn, Frank beside him, talking with his hands, the way Frank talked about everything. 3 cowboys followed, heads bent against the wind. On the stairs behind her, a floorboard creaked. Clara didn't turn around, but in the reflection of the kitchen window, dark against the bright snow outside, she could see Lucy standing on the middle step, watching her, not speaking, just watching with those fierce blue eyes that looked so much like the mother she was trying to protect. Then Lucy turned and went back up, quiet as she'd come. Clara dried her hands, tied on her apron, reached for Hannah's recipe box. Beef stew tonight. 7 men and 3 children, one of whom wanted to destroy her, one who was watching to see which way the wind blew, and one who already trusted her enough to hold her hand, and a man who'd told her plain as day, "Don't get attached. This is temporary. Everyone leaves." Clara opened the recipe box and saw Hannah's note again, tucked under the sourdough recipe. "He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else." The snow was still falling. The road back to town had disappeared under 3 feet of white. The temperature was dropping toward something that would kill a person who wasn't careful. Clara Aldridge had nowhere to go, nothing to fall back on, and a kitchen full of things she didn't know how to use. She picked up the beef stew card and started reading. The beef stew was edible. Barely. Clara had followed Hannah's card to the letter, but simmer until tender turned out to mean something different than she'd guessed. The meat was tough. The potatoes were soft on the outside and hard in the center, which she hadn't known was possible. The gravy tasted like flour that had given up on itself. Frank Harlow ate 2 bowls. "Ma'am, this is the finest thing I've put in my mouth since Mrs. Pratt's roast chicken. And that was October." "Frank, the meat's like boot leather." "I've eaten boot leather, Miss Aldridge. This is significantly better." He mopped the bowl with bread Clara had bought from the general store because she hadn't attempted baking yet. "Besides, you've been cooking 1 day. 1 day. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was a decent stew. Rome didn't have 7 hungry men waiting on it. No, but it had an army, and I guarantee those soldiers ate worse than this." Billy Price nodded so hard his red hair flopped. "My mama's stew was terrible for years, ma'am. Papa said it built character." "Your papa was being kind." "No, ma'am, my papa was being hungry. There's a difference." The hands laughed. Even Hank, who rarely spoke, made a sound that might have been amusement. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. These men weren't judging her. They were rooting for her. Eli ate without comment, cleaned his plate, as he'd cleaned it at breakfast, and said nothing about the quality. When the hands filed out into the cold, he stayed behind. "The trick with beef," he said, stacking plates, "is time. Low heat, long time. Hannah used to start her stew at noon for a 6 o'clock supper." 6 hours? "Good things take time, Miss Aldridge." He carried the dishes to the basin, set them down, and walked out. No warmth, no encouragement beyond the practical. Just information delivered and departure made. Clara washed dishes and thought about Hannah's note. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. The first week taught Clara 3 things. First, that a cast-iron stove was a living creature with moods and preferences, and the only way to learn them was to get burned. She got burned. A blister on her right palm from the firebox door. A scald on her wrist from steam. A singed eyebrow from leaning too close when she opened the oven. Each injury was a lesson, and Clara collected them the way other women collected recipes. Second, that Rosie Dawson was the easiest person to love that Clara had ever met. The child followed her everywhere, chattering about everything and nothing, asking questions that ranged from practical to philosophical with no warning. "Why does bread rise?" "Yeast makes bubbles in the dough." "Why?" "Because that's what yeast does." "But why does it want to?" "I don't think yeast wants anything, Rosie." "Everything wants something. Papa says even cattle want things. They want grass and water and to not be bothered. Maybe yeast wants to make bread fluffy." Clara couldn't argue with that. Third, she learned that Lucy Dawson was waging a war of silence that was more effective than any words could have been. Lucy didn't speak to Clara, didn't acknowledge her presence in a room, walked past her in the hallway like she was furniture, ate whatever Clara cooked, always from a plate left outside her door, never at the table with the family. On the 4th morning, Clara found her clean laundry folded on the kitchen table at 5 a.m. Every shirt pressed, every sock matched. Work Clara hadn't asked for, done to a standard Clara couldn't match. Lucy stood in the doorway, watching. "You fold the towels wrong," Lucy said. "Mama folded them in thirds, not halves. Thirds fit the shelf." "Show me." Lucy blinked. She'd expected argument, not surrender. "The shelf in the linen closet," Clara said. "Show me how your mother did it." Lucy crossed the kitchen, took a towel from the basket, and folded it in thirds with quick, precise movements. "Like that. And the sheets go on the left, pillowcases on the right. Mama had a system." "Then I'll use her system." "You don't have to." "It's a good system. Why would I change it?" Lucy looked at her for a long time. Then she set the towel down and walked out without another word. But she'd been in the same room as Clara for 45 seconds without hostility, and Clara counted that as a victory worth more than any pancake. Thomas was the quiet mystery. He appeared at meals, ate without fuss, said, "Thank you, ma'am," with that slight stutter that disappeared when he forgot to be nervous, and retreated to his room with whatever book he was devouring. On the 6th day, Clara found him sitting on the back porch in the cold, reading with his coat buttoned wrong and no gloves. "Thomas, it's 14 degrees. "I know. You'll freeze." "Lucy's practicing piano inside. I can't read when she practices. She does it loud on purpose." Clara sat down beside him. Her own hands were already aching from the cold, but the boy had been out here long enough that his fingers were red. "What are you reading now?" "David Copperfield." No stutter. Books were safe ground. It's about a boy whose stepfather is cruel, and he has to find his own way. "I know that story." Did you like it?" "I loved it. I read it by candlelight when I was 13, because the landlady wouldn't let us use the gas lamps past 8. Thomas looked at her with something new. "You read by candlelight?" "For years. My sister Grace and I shared one candle between us. I'd read for an hour, then she'd read for an hour. We went through every book the church library had." "That's—" Thomas searched for the word. "That's like something from a story." It was a story. It was my story. Yours is different, but it's still yours. He was quiet for a moment. "Lucy says you're going to leave like everyone else." "Lucy might be right." "But you might stay?" "I might. I don't know yet. But I'll tell you the truth about it either way. Is that fair?" Thomas nodded. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He shifted slightly on the porch step, closing the gap between them by 2 inches. Not touching, just closer. "You can read inside," Clara said. "I'll talk to Lucy about the piano." "You can't talk to Lucy about anything. She doesn't listen." "Then I'll listen to her. Sometimes that works better." The second week, Clara's cooking improved enough that the hands stopped bracing themselves before the first bite. Her biscuits came out golden more often than not. Her coffee found the right strength. The beef stew, started at noon as Eli had suggested, emerged tender and rich enough that Frank Harlow declared it a religious experience and asked for the recipe. "It's Hannah's recipe," Clara said. Frank's face softened. "Well, that makes sense. Hannah's stew could make a man weep. Good to have it back in the kitchen." Clara noticed Eli's hand tighten on his fork when Frank said Hannah's name. Just a flicker, there and gone, but she saw it. She saw most things. She'd spent a lifetime watching people for clues about what was safe and what wasn't. Sunday came, and with it the question she'd been dreading. "Church is at 9, Eli said at breakfast, dressed in a clean shirt and string tie. "If you're inclined." "Am I welcome?" "You're part of this household. Household goes to church." "That's not the same as welcome." Eli looked at her. "You'll be welcome because you're with me. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Lucy appeared at the bottom of the stairs, dressed for church in a blue dress that was slightly too short. She'd grown since it was made, and nobody had adjusted the hem. Clara noticed, but said nothing. "I'm not sitting with her," Lucy announced. "You'll sit where I tell you to sit," Eli said. "Mama's pew is ours. It's not for strangers." "Lucy." "It's fine," Clara said. "I can sit in the back." "You'll sit with the family." Eli's voice left no room. "Lucy, get your brother and sister. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Lucy's eyes burned. She turned and went upstairs, and Clara heard her say something sharp to Thomas that she couldn't make out. "She'll come around," Eli said. "And if she doesn't? Then she'll learn to be civil. That's the minimum I require." The Stillwater church was small, white, with a bell tower and plain glass windows. The congregation was filing in when they arrived, ranchers and shopkeepers and their families in Sunday clothes. Clara felt the eyes on her the moment she stepped down from the wagon. That's the mail-order bride who got thrown over. That's the one working for Eli Dawson, living under his roof with those children and no chaperone. She heard the whispers like she'd heard them at the train station, like she'd heard them her whole life. The sound of people deciding what you were worth before you'd opened your mouth. Eli walked her to a pew in the middle of the church. Not the back where the uncertain sat. Not the front where the established families claimed territory. The middle. A statement. Lucy sat as far from Clara as the pew allowed, pressing against the armrest like proximity was contagious. Thomas sat between them, buffer and bridge. Rosie climbed into Clara's lap without asking and stayed there. Eli didn't react to Rosie's choice, but Clara saw his jaw tighten. Don't get attached, his words from the first day. And here was his youngest daughter, curled in a stranger's lap, like she'd found the place she'd been looking for. The sermon was about Ruth, the foreigner who gleaned in strange fields and found a home through loyalty and work. Clara wondered if Reverend Alderman had chosen the text on purpose. Probably. Small towns kept no secrets. After the service, the social navigation began. A woman approached, 50-ish, with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, and the kind of posture that suggested she'd never once wondered whether she belonged somewhere. Miss Aldridge, I'm Nell Braddock. I run the general store with my late husband's brother. Wanted to welcome you to Stillwater proper. Thank you, Mrs. Braddock. Nell, we don't stand on ceremony much out here. She glanced at Eli, who was talking to the Reverend. He's a good man. Better than he lets on. Takes a certain kind of woman to see past all that granite. Before Clara could answer, another voice cut in. Nell, are you already matchmaking? The woman's been here a week. Ida Crenshaw. Clara knew the type before she knew the name. 40 years old, dressed better than anyone in the county, with a smile that had edges. Wife of the bank manager. The kind of woman who ran a town's opinion the way a conductor ran a train. I'm not matchmaking, Ida. I'm welcoming. Of course, though I do wonder about the propriety of the arrangement. A young woman living under a widower's roof, with his children, no chaperone. Ida's eyes swept over Clara's plain dress, her work-roughened hands. People do talk. People talk because they've got nothing better to do, Nell said. I'm just concerned for Miss Aldridge's reputation, and for the Dawson children. They've been through so much already. Clara felt the blade beneath the silk. This woman wasn't concerned. She was staking territory, drawing lines, establishing that Clara was an outsider who existed here only by the tolerance of women like Ida Crenshaw. Mrs. Crenshaw, Clara said, I appreciate your concern. My arrangement with Mr. Dawson is employment. I cook, I clean, I help with the children. I sleep in a room with a lock on the door, which I use every night. If that arrangement offends anyone's sensibilities, I'm sorry for it, but I won't apologize for earning an honest living. Ida's smile didn't waver. Of course, dear. No one's suggesting anything improper. I just know how these things look. They look like a man who needed help and a woman who needed work. Yes, how convenient for you both. The arrangement at Copper Ridge is housekeeper and employer, Mrs. Crenshaw. Eli appeared beside Clara, his voice the same quiet tone he used for everything, but underneath it ran something cold enough to match the weather. Same as Mrs. Chen, same as Mrs. Pratt, unless you had questions about their virtue, too. Ida's composure cracked for just a moment. No questions at all, Mr. Dawson. Good. Then we understand each other. He looked at Nell. Mrs. Braddock, always a pleasure. Eli. Nell's eyes were warm, Bring the children by the store this week. I've got peppermint sticks." "Peppermint!" Rosie shouted from somewhere near Clara's knees. "Papa, she said peppermint." "I heard, Rosie." "Can we go today?" "Not today." "Tomorrow?" "We'll see." "That means no." "It means we'll see." On the ride home, Lucy spoke for the first time all morning. "Ida Crenshaw's been trying to get Papa to court her niece since Mama died." Clara glanced at Eli, who stared straight ahead at the road. "Her niece Catherine moved here from St. Louis last year," Lucy continued. "She's 24 and pretty and plays piano at the church social. Ida's been parading her in front of Papa every chance she gets." "Lucy," Eli said, "that's why Ida doesn't like you being here. It's not about propriety. It's about Catherine losing her chance." "That's enough, Lucy." "I'm just telling the truth. You said truth matters in this house." Eli's hands tightened on the reins. Clara watched the muscles in his jaw work, the battle between anger and the recognition that his daughter had used his own words against him with surgical precision. "Your father's right," Clara said. "It is enough. Other people's motives aren't our business." Lucy looked at Clara with surprise. She'd expected Clara to press the advantage, to use Ida Crenshaw as common ground, to try to build an alliance. "You're not curious?" Lucy asked. "About Catherine?" "Not particularly." "Why not?" "Because I didn't come here to marry your father, Lucy. I came here to cook beef stew and learn how to fold towels in thirds. The rest isn't my concern." Something shifted in Lucy's expression. Not warmth, but the first crack in something that had been solid as stone. That night, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Clara sat at the kitchen table mending Frank's shirt by lamplight. The tear in the shoulder seam was ragged, like he'd caught it on a nail. She worked the needle through fabric, the motion as natural as breathing. The one skill she'd brought to this place that needed no learning. Eli came through on his way to lock the front door. He stopped when he saw her. "You don't have to do that." "I know. I want to." "Mending's not part of the job. Neither is teaching your son that it's all right to love books more than horses." "But I did that today, too." Eli was still. "What do you mean?" "Thomas reads on the back porch in 14-degree weather because Lucy practices piano inside and he can't concentrate. He'd rather freeze than ask her to stop. He'd rather freeze than tell you he doesn't fit the shape you've made for him." "I haven't made a shape for him." "You've made a shape for what a ranch boy should be. Thomas knows he doesn't fit it. That's why he stutters around you and not around me." The silence that followed was the kind that had weight. Clara kept sewing, not looking up, letting the words land where they'd land. "He stutters around everyone," Eli said. "He didn't stutter once when he told me about Treasure Island. He didn't stutter when he asked if I'd stay. He stutters when he thinks he's being measured against something he can't reach." "I've never once told that boy he wasn't enough." "You don't have to tell a child something for them to hear it." Clara tied off the thread and bit it clean. "My father never told me I was a burden, but I knew I was. Children know." Eli stood in the kitchen doorway, and Clara watched something move behind his eyes. Not anger, something worse. The recognition of a failure he hadn't seen. "I love my son," he said quietly. "I know you do. That's not the same as understanding him." He looked at her for a long time. Then he turned and went upstairs without another word. Clara finished Frank's shirt, then Hank's socks, then a pair of Thomas's trousers with a torn knee. The lamp burned low. The house settled around her with the sounds of old wood in cold weather, creaking and popping like an old man's joints. She thought about Hannah's note. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. She thought about Eli's face when Rosie climbed into her lap at church. The tightened jaw, the fear behind the granite. She thought about Lucy, who folded towels in thirds because that's how her dead mother did it, and who played piano loud enough to drive her brother into the cold because being angry was easier than being sad. She thought about Thomas reading Dickens on a frozen porch, finding in stories the understanding he couldn't find in his own house. She thought about Rosie, who grabbed strangers' hands and trusted them completely, because she'd never been old enough to learn that people leave. And she thought about herself, Clara Aldridge, 31, from Boston, who'd come 2,000 miles to marry a man who didn't want her, and ended up in a kitchen at midnight, mending a foreman's shirt by lamplight, in a dead woman's house, in a snowstorm that wouldn't quit. Hannah's recipe box sat on the shelf, holding 30 recipes and one secret message from a woman who'd known her husband better than he knew himself. Clara blew out the lamp and climbed the stairs in the dark. On the second-floor landing, she passed Lucy's door. A line of light showed beneath it. She stopped, raised her hand to knock, then lowered it. Not yet. Some doors had to open from the inside. Clara went to her room, locked the door as she did every night, and lay in the bed that had once been a sewing room in a dead woman's house. Through the window, the snow was still falling. It had been falling since she'd arrived, and it showed no sign of stopping. Somewhere out there, Ward Calloway was sleeping beside his pretty bride, with her father's money and her green velvet dress. Clara didn't think about him. She thought about pancakes shaped like clouds, and a boy who didn't stutter when he talked about treasure, and a man with blue-gray eyes who was so afraid of losing that he'd forgotten how to hold on. She closed her eyes and fell asleep with her hands still smelling of thread and lamp oil, and the beef stew that she'd make better tomorrow. Thomas collapsed on a Tuesday. Clara was rolling out pie crust, the 5th attempt that week, when she heard the thud from upstairs. Not a dropped book, not a slammed door, the sound of a body hitting the floor, heavy and wrong. She was up the stairs before she'd set down the rolling pin. Thomas's door was open. He was on the floor beside his bed, face down, his copy of David Copperfield splayed beneath him, like he'd been standing up and the ground had pulled him down. "Thomas!" Clara dropped to her knees. She turned him over. His skin was on fire. Not warm, burning. The kind of heat that radiated through her hands like she was touching the stove. "Thomas, look at me!" His eyes opened, glassy and unfocused. "Mama?" Clara's stomach turned to ice. "It's Clara, honey. Can you tell me what hurts?" "Everything." His voice was thin as paper. "My chest. Can't breathe right." She pressed her ear to his chest. The rattling sound she heard there stopped her heart. She'd heard that sound before. In a Boston tenement when she was 16, sitting beside her mother's bed, listening to lungs filled with fluid that no amount of prayer could drain. Pneumonia. "Lucy!" Clara shouted. "Lucy, get your father, now!" Footsteps on the landing. Lucy appeared, annoyed, ready to fight about whatever Clara wanted. Then she saw Thomas on the floor, and the color drained from her face like water from a cracked cup. "Tommy? Get your father. He's in the barn. Run!" Lucy ran. Clara heard the front door slam, heard boots on the porch, and then she was alone with a 9-year-old boy whose breathing sounded like something tearing. She lifted Thomas onto the bed. He weighed almost nothing, this boy made of books and quiet thoughts. She piled blankets on him, then pulled them off because his fever was too high and heat would make it worse. Then she put one blanket back because he was shaking so hard his teeth chattered. "Stay with me, Thomas. Keep talking." "About what?" "Anything. Tell me about David Copperfield. Where are you in the story? He just met Agnes. Thomas's breathing was shallow, each inhale a fight. She's the one who really loves him, but he doesn't know it yet because he's chasing Dora. Men are stupid that way. Thomas almost smiled. Almost. Then the coughing started and the smile died, and Clara held him while his thin body convulsed with the effort of pulling air through lungs that were drowning from the inside. Eli came through the door like something wild, snow on his shoulders, hat gone, face stripped of every wall he'd built. How bad? He was beside the bed in 2 strides, his hand on Thomas's forehead. The hand that could rope cattle and break horses trembled. His chest is congested, fever's high, breathing's bad. Clara kept her voice level because one of them had to. We need Doc Sullivan. Doc Sullivan's in Rollins. Train's not running on account of the snow. When does he get back? 3 days, maybe 4. Thomas coughed again, and something came up. Clara grabbed the cloth from the nightstand and caught it. Rust-colored. Bloody. Eli saw it. His face went white as the snow outside. He stood up, stepped back from the bed, and Clara watched something happen to him that she'd been expecting since the day she found Hannah's note. He shut down. Right there in front of her. The fear hit something inside him and a door closed, and the man who stood in that room suddenly wasn't a father anymore. He was a wall. Granite and silence and nothing behind the eyes. Eli, Clara said his name sharp. I need you here. I'll send Frank for the doc. Frank can't get to Rollins in this snow and you know it. I need you here, in this room, with your son. You seem to have it handled. The coldness of it stole her breath. His boy was lying in bed, struggling to breathe, and Eli was retreating, pulling back, disappearing into the same place he'd gone when Hannah died, because that was the only way he knew to survive what he couldn't control. Your son is sick, Clara said. He's scared. He needs his father. He needs a doctor. He needs you. Right now, this minute, he needs you. Eli looked at Thomas. The boy's eyes were closed now, his chest rising and falling with a sound like wet paper being torn. Eli's fist clenched at his side. His jaw locked. Then he turned and walked out. Clara heard his boots on the stairs, heard the front door open and close, and he was gone. Into the snow, into the barn, into whatever dark corner he crawled to when the world got too close. He always does that. Lucy's voice, small from the doorway. Clara turned. The girl stood there hugging herself, and for the first time she didn't look angry. She looked 12. When Mama got sick, he did the same thing. Went to the barn. Didn't come back till it was too late. It's not too late, Lucy. Your brother's going to be fine. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I'm going to act like I do, and I need your help. Something changed in Lucy's face. The wall didn't come down, but a window opened in it. What do you need? Lucy asked. Boil water, all you can. Then find every clean cloth in this house and bring them here. Do you have mustard powder? In the pantry. Bring it. And honey if we have it. And the whiskey from your father's study. Lucy didn't argue, didn't question. She turned and moved with a purpose Clara hadn't seen before. The purpose of a girl who'd been taking care of people since she was 7, and finally had someone telling her what to do, instead of figuring it out alone. Rosie appeared in the doorway, clutching her one-eared rabbit. Is Tommy going to die like Mama? The question hit Clara like a fist. She knelt down, eye level with the child. No, sweetheart. Tommy is sick, but we're going to take care of him. Promise? Clara hesitated. She'd promised herself she wouldn't lie in this house, but the child's eyes were so wide, so terrified, And some promises were made not because you knew you could keep them, but because the person asking needed to hear them. I promise I'm going to do everything I can. Rosie studied her face with that uncanny 5-year-old gravity. That's not the same as promising he'll be okay. No, it isn't. But you'll try really hard? The hardest I've ever tried anything. Rosie nodded. Then she walked into Thomas's room, climbed onto the bed beside her brother, and tucked the one-eared rabbit under his arm. "Mr. Buttons will help," she said. "He helped me when I had the cough last winter." Clara made a mustard plaster, the way she'd seen the charity nurse make one in Boston. Mustard powder mixed with flour and warm water, spread on cloth, laid across Thomas's chest. The heat in the mustard drew blood to the surface, helped loosen the congestion. It was old medicine, the kind that worked when there was nothing better. She dosed him with honey and whiskey, a teaspoon every hour, to soothe his throat and keep the coughing from tearing him apart. She kept the room warm but not hot, aired the bedding when it soaked through with sweat, and talked to him through the worst of it, reading David Copperfield aloud when he was conscious, just talking when he wasn't. Lucy brought everything Clara asked for without being asked twice. She changed cloths, boiled water, kept the stove fed, and managed Rosie with a gentleness Clara hadn't seen from her before. At midnight, Thomas's fever spiked. His whole body shook with chills so violent the bed frame rattled against the wall. Clara piled blankets on him, held him through the shaking, and sang. She didn't know why she sang. She didn't even know what she was singing at first, just a melody from somewhere deep, something her mother had hummed while scrubbing floors in their Boston tenement. Thomas's hand found hers in the dark. Don't leave. I'm right here. Don't leave, like everyone leaves. I'm right here, Thomas. I'm not going anywhere. His fingers tightened around hers, hot as coals, and Clara held on and kept singing until the shaking passed and his breathing eased from terrible to merely bad. Lucy sat in the corner, watching. She hadn't gone to bed, hadn't been told to stay. She just stayed, because her brother was sick, and some things were more important than anger. "You know what you're doing," Lucy said quietly. "No. I'm guessing based on what I saw nurses do when I was young." "You're guessing well." Clara looked at her. In the lamplight, with the hard expression gone, Lucy looked exactly like the photograph of Hannah that hung in the parlor downstairs. Same cheekbones, same mouth, same eyes that held too much for their age. "Your mother was brave," Clara said. "She got sick nursing other people's children. I know. You're brave too. You've been holding this family together since you were 7. Somebody had to." "Yes, and it shouldn't have been you. You were a child, Lucy. You still are." Lucy's chin trembled. Just once. Then she locked it down, the way her father locked everything down, and Clara saw the resemblance that ran deeper than Hannah's cheekbones. This girl had her father's walls, built the same way, for the same reason. "He's going to be okay," Lucy said. Not a question, a command. "Yes," Clara said, and this time she said it like a promise. The fever broke at dawn. Clara woke with her head on the edge of Thomas's bed, her neck screaming, and her hands still wrapped around his. The boy's skin was cool, not cold, not burning, cool, normal. His eyes opened, clear for the first time in 12 hours. "Miss Clara?" "Right here." "I'm hungry." Clara laughed. It came out half sob, but she didn't care. "What do you want?" "Pancakes. The cloud ones." "Cloud pancakes, coming right up." She stood, and every joint in her body protested. She was halfway to the door when Lucy's voice stopped her. "Clara." First time. No Miss Aldridge. No cold formality. Just her name, said by a 12-year-old girl who'd sat up all night watching a stranger fight to save her brother. Clara turned. "Thank you," Lucy said. 2 words that cracked the wall from top to bottom. "You're welcome." Clara went downstairs to make pancakes, and Eli was sitting at the kitchen table. He looked like a man who'd spent the night in a barn, because he had. Hay on his shoulders, dark circles under his eyes. His hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. "His fever broke," Clara said. Eli closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped. The breath he let out sounded like it had been locked inside his chest for 12 hours. "I should have stayed," he said. "Yes, you should have." "I couldn't." "You could have. You chose not to. There's a difference." His eyes opened, raw, no walls, no granite, just a man stripped bare by his own failure. "When I saw the blood on that cloth, all I could see was Hannah. The same sound in her chest, the same fever. I watched her die in that bed, and I couldn't stop it. And when Thomas isn't Hannah, and I'm not you. I didn't leave." The words landed hard. She watched him absorb the blow, watched him take it without flinching, because he knew he deserved it. "Your son called for you last night," Clara said. "He was scared and burning with fever, and he wanted his father. I was there. Lucy was there. You were in the barn." "I know." "Hannah left a note in her recipe box. Did you know that?" Eli went still. "What?" "A note. At the bottom of the stack. She wrote it before she died. She said you'd try to shut everyone out. She said not to let you." The silence that filled the kitchen was so heavy, Clara could feel it pressing on her skin. "She knew me," Eli said finally. "Better than I knew myself." "She was right. You shut down last night because feeling scared meant feeling something, and you've decided feeling nothing is safer than feeling anything." "It is safer." "It's not living, it's hiding. And your children deserve a father who's present, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." Eli set down the cold coffee. His hands were shaking. This man who roped cattle and drove through blizzards and ran a ranch with iron discipline, his hands were shaking. "I'm afraid," he said. The words came out like they'd been pried loose with a crowbar. "Every day, every morning I wake up afraid that today's the day I lose one of them. That the world takes something else from me. Because that's what the world does. It takes and takes and takes. And so you hold them at arm's length. Keep everything professional. Don't get attached. Don't promise anything. Don't let anyone close enough that losing them would break you." "Yes." "How's that working?" He looked at her. "It's not." "No, it's not. Because Rosie grabs strangers' hands because she's so hungry for someone to hold on to. Thomas reads alone in the freezing cold because he doesn't feel safe being himself in his own house. And Lucy is 12 years old going on 40 because somebody had to be the adult and you checked out." Each sentence was a knife. Clara knew it. Delivered them anyway, because kindness right now would be cruelty. Because this man needed the truth more than he needed comfort. "You're right," Eli said. "About all of it. I know I'm right. Now go upstairs and sit with your son. Hold his hand. Tell him you were scared. Tell him you're sorry you left. He's 9 years old, and he thinks his father leaves when things get hard. Fix that." Eli stood. He walked past her, stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Clara." "What?" "I'm glad you were here last night." "I'm glad I was too. Now go." He went. Clara made pancakes, cloud-shaped ones, because that's what Thomas wanted. And right now, Thomas was getting whatever Thomas wanted. She made coffee the right strength, bacon crisp, and biscuits that came out golden because she'd finally learned the stove's moods, and the stove had finally stopped fighting her. The hands filed in. Frank first. He looked at Clara's face, at the dark circles, at the flour on her apron, and said nothing about the quality of the food. He just sat down, ate everything, and squeezed her shoulder on the way out. "Heard the boys better. You did good, Miss Aldridge. Real good." "Thank you, Frank." "Don't thank me. Thank whoever taught you to be stubborn enough to sit up all night with a sick child when his own father couldn't." "Nobody taught me that. I learned it by having nobody sit up for me." Frank's face softened into something sad. "Well, maybe that's the best teacher there is. The hard kind." That afternoon, a wagon pulled into the yard. Clara was in the kitchen heating broth for Thomas when she heard the wheels. She looked out the window, and her hands went still on the pot. Ward Calloway climbed down from a wagon that looked worse than the last time she'd seen it. One wheel wobbled. The horse was thin, and Ward himself looked like a man who'd been chewed up and spit out by something meaner than he was. Clara wiped her hands on her apron and walked outside. "Miss Aldridge." Ward removed his hat. His hair was unwashed. His clothes hung loose. He'd lost weight. "Mr. Calloway?" "I need to speak with you." "You're speaking." He flinched at the flatness in her voice. "Vivian left me. Took $2,000 and ran off with a card dealer from Cheyenne. Left me with debts and a ranch I can't run alone." "I'm sorry to hear that." "I made a mistake, Clara, choosing her over you. I see that now. You were honest with me, straightforward, and I was a fool to pick a pretty face over real character." Clara studied him. 6 weeks ago, this man had been everything she wanted. The answer to every prayer she'd prayed in that Boston tenement. A home, a husband, a future that didn't end in blindness and poverty. She felt nothing now. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just a kind of distant recognition, like seeing a coat you'd once loved in the shop window and realizing it no longer fit. "I'm asking for another chance," Ward said. "Come with me. Montana, maybe. Somewhere fresh. We can build what we talked about in those letters." "No." "Clara, no, Ward. Not maybe, not let me think about it. No." "You'd rather stay here? As a housekeeper? A servant in another man's house?" "I'd rather be my own woman than any man's second choice." "I'm choosing you now." "Because she left. Because you ran out of options. That's not choosing, Ward. That's drowning and grabbing the nearest thing that floats." His face reddened. "That's not fair. Fair would have been a telegraph from Cheyenne telling me not to get on that train. Fair would have been the truth before I traveled 2,000 miles to be humiliated on a platform in front of strangers. Don't talk to me about fair." Ward stepped closer. His hand closed around her arm. Not hard, but firm. "Clara, be reasonable. What kind of future do you have here?" "Take your hand off me." "Not until you listen. She told you to let go." Lucy stood on the porch. 12 years old, arms crossed, chin raised, eyes blazing with a fury that had nothing to do with Clara and everything to do with a girl who'd watched too many people try to take things from the women in her life. "This is a private conversation, young lady," Ward said. "This is my porch." And she said, "Let go." Ward released Clara's arm. "Who is this?" "My name's Lucy Dawson, and you're the man who left Miss Aldridge at the train station. I know all about you. The whole town knows. You picked the pretty one, and the pretty one robbed you blind. And now you're here, begging for scraps." "Lucy," Clara said, "he doesn't get to come here and grab you. He doesn't get to tell you to be reasonable. He threw you away like you were nothing. And now he wants you back because he's got nothing. And that's not love. That's just being pathetic." The words poured out of Lucy like water through a broken dam, fierce and unstoppable. And Clara realized with a shock that vibrated through her entire body that Lucy wasn't just defending Clara. She was defending her mother, defending every woman who'd ever been treated like something a man could pick up and put down, depending on what suited him. Ward's face had gone dark red. "I don't have to stand here and be lectured by a child." "Then leave," Lucy said. "The road's that way. Try not to get lost, though I wouldn't mind if you did." "Lucy, that's enough." Clara's voice was firm. "Mr. Calloway, you have your answer. It won't change. Please leave." Ward looked between them, the woman who wouldn't have him and the girl who'd shred him to pieces if he stayed another minute. His mouth opened, closed. He shook his head. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Clara said, "but it'll be my regret, not yours." He climbed back onto his broken wagon and drove away. The wobbling wheels squeaked with each rotation, and neither Clara nor Lucy looked away until he was gone. Then Lucy sat down on the porch step and put her face in her hands. Clara sat beside her. Not touching, not pushing, just present. "I don't know why I did that," Lucy whispered. "Because you're brave. Because you know what it looks like when someone tries to take away a woman's choice." "I was so mean to you." "You were protecting your family. That's not mean. That's love." Lucy lifted her face. Tears streaked her cheeks. The first tears Clara had ever seen from this girl who'd built herself into a fortress. "I miss my mama," Lucy said. "I know. I miss her every single day, and nobody talks about her. Papa won't say her name. Tommy was too little to really remember. Rosie never knew her, and I'm the only one who remembers what her voice sounded like. And sometimes I'm scared I'll forget that too, and then she'll really be gone." Clara put her arm around Lucy. The girl stiffened for a moment, every instinct screaming to pull away, to rebuild the wall, to be strong. Then she broke. She turned into Clara and cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. The accumulated grief of 5 years poured out onto the shoulder of a woman she'd tried to hate and couldn't. Clara held her and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Grief didn't need words. It needed witness. It needed someone to hold you while the storm passed, and not let go until you were ready. They sat on that porch step for a long time, while the snow fell around them and the cold bit at their fingers, and neither of them moved. Finally, Lucy pulled back, wiped her face with her sleeve, took a shaky breath. "I still don't need a mother," she said. "I know, but maybe I could use a friend." Clara's chest ached with the beauty and the cost of those words. This girl who'd spent 5 years building walls, offering to open a door. "I'd like that," Clara said. Lucy nodded, stood up, brushed snow off her skirt. "I'm going to check on Tommy." "Lucy?" The girl turned. "Your mother's voice. Tell me about it sometime. I'd like to hear." Something broke open in Lucy's face, something that looked like sunlight through a crack in a door that had been closed too long. "Maybe," Lucy said. "Maybe I will." She went inside. Clara stayed on the porch, her arm still warm where Lucy had leaned against her, Ward Calloway's wagon tracks already disappearing under fresh snow. From the window above, Clara heard Eli's voice, quiet, reading aloud, David Copperfield, from the chapter where Thomas had left off. He was sitting with his son, holding the book, being present. Clara closed her eyes and let the snow fall on her face and thought, this might work. This broken family and this broken woman and this man who was learning, slowly and painfully, to unlock the doors he'd sealed shut. It might actually work. Something shifted in the house after that day on the porch. Lucy didn't transform overnight. She wasn't that kind of girl. But the silence changed. It went from hostile to cautious, from a weapon to a bridge being tested one plank at a time. She started eating breakfast at the table. Not beside Clara, not across from her, but at the table. In the same room. breathing the same air without treating it like a concession. The first morning Lucy sat down, Rosie froze with a forkful of pancake halfway to her mouth. Thomas looked up from his book. Frank stopped chewing. The whole kitchen held its breath. "Pass the butter," Lucy said, to Clara, looking right at her. Clara passed the butter. "Thank you." "You're welcome." And that was it. No fanfare, no acknowledgement, just butter passed between two people who decided not to be enemies anymore. But Frank caught Clara's eye across the table and winked, and Rosie went back to eating with a grin that said she understood exactly what had just happened, even if she was 5. Eli watched from his end of the table. He'd been different since the night of Thomas's fever. Quieter, if that was possible for a man who already used words like they cost money. But a different kind of quiet. The granite was still there, but something underneath it had cracked, and through the cracks came things he hadn't shown before. He helped Thomas with reading in the evenings now, sitting beside him on the parlor floor, their heads bent together over whatever book Thomas had chosen. He let Rosie climb into his lap without stiffening. He said Hannah's name. That was the biggest change. Small moments, almost accidental. "Hannah used to put nutmeg in the apple butter." "Your mother had a way with horses, Lucy. You get that from her." "Hannah would have liked this snow. She always said Wyoming winter was God's way of making you appreciate spring." Each time he said her name, something eased in the room, like a window being opened in a house that had been sealed too long. Clara felt the change between them too. Something growing in the spaces between words, in the moments when their hands brushed reaching for the same dish, in the way his eyes found hers across a room and held on a beat too long. She tried not to think about it, tried to remember his words from her first day. "This is a job, no attachments." But Hannah's note lived in her memory like a splinter she couldn't pull out. He thinks if he doesn't love anything new, he can't lose anything else. 3 weeks after Thomas's illness, on a Wednesday night, Eli stayed after the hands had gone. He was helping Clara dry dishes, which had become routine without either of them naming it. "You've changed things here," he said. "I make better pancakes now, that's about it." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Clara set a plate on the shelf. "What do you mean?" "Thomas read aloud at dinner tonight, in front of everyone. He didn't stutter once. He stutters less when he feels safe. He feels safe because of you." Eli set down the towel. "Lucy laughed today. Did you hear her? She was in the barn with Rosie, and she laughed. And I stood there like an idiot because I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard that sound. She laughs when nobody's watching. She's been laughing for years. You just weren't listening." "I wasn't. I know that now." He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed, then uncrossed, like he couldn't figure out what to do with his body. "Clara, I need to say something." "Then say it." "I told you the first day that this was a job, no attachments, keep it clean." "I remember." "I was wrong." Clara's hands stopped moving in the dishwater. She didn't turn around. "I was wrong because I was scared," Eli continued. "And I've been scared for so long that I forgot what it feels like to not be scared. But you walked into this house, and you weren't afraid of my daughter's anger, or my son's silence, or my youngest's neediness, or my—" "Your what?" "My walls. You weren't afraid of my walls. You walked right up to them and knocked." Clara turned. He was looking at her with those blue-gray eyes, and the granite was gone. All of it. What was underneath was raw and open and more frightened than she'd ever seen a man look. "I'm not good at this," he said. "At what?" "Saying what I feel. Hannah used to say I'd rather wrestle a bull than have a conversation about my emotions. She wasn't wrong." "Eli, let me finish. Please." He took a breath that seemed to cost him something. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you told Lucy you were a terrible mother and meant it as a kindness. Maybe when you sat up all night with Thomas and didn't ask anyone's permission. Maybe when you read my dead wife's secret note, and instead of running, you stayed and told me the truth she couldn't. What truth? That I was disappearing. That I was losing my children by trying to protect them. That safe isn't the same as alive. Clara's heart was hammering so loud she was sure he could hear it. I'm not asking you for anything, Eli said. I know that's not fair. Not when you're living under my roof and depending on me for employment. I'd never put you in that position. But I wanted you to know that what I feel for you isn't professional, and it isn't gratitude, and it isn't loneliness. It's you, Clara. Just you. The kitchen was silent except for the fire in the stove and the wind outside, and the sound of two people standing 3 feet apart, with everything and nothing between them. I'm scared too, Clara said. Of what? Of wanting something this much. The last time I wanted something this much, I ended up on my knees on a frozen train platform. I'm not Ward Calloway. I know you're not. That's what makes it terrifying. Ward was paper and ink. You're real. And real things can hurt worse. Eli took a step toward her. I'm not going to hurt you. You don't know that. No, but I know that not having you would hurt more. And that's enough for me to try. He reached out. His hand found hers, wet from the dishwater, rough from weeks of work. His fingers closed around hers and held, and the touch was so careful, so deliberate, like he was handling something precious that he couldn't believe he'd been given permission to hold. Clara looked at their joined hands, his scarred brown steady despite everything, hers red from hot water, calloused from the stove, capable in ways they hadn't been 8 weeks ago. I'm not answering you tonight, she said. I'm not asking tonight, just letting you know where I stand. And where's that? Right here, not going anywhere, not to the barn, not behind a wall. Right here. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Good night, Eli. Good night, Clara. She went upstairs. He stayed in the kitchen, and something that had been building since the day he picked up her valise at the train station settled between them like snowfall, quiet and steady, and covering everything. Clara lay awake that night, listening to the wind change. It had been blowing from the west for weeks, steady and cold. Now it shifted. Northeast. Harder. The house creaked in ways she hadn't heard before, sounds that went deeper than cold wood settling. By morning, she knew something was wrong. Eli was already dressed when she came downstairs at 4. Not in his work clothes, in everything he owned. 2 shirts, heavy coat, a scarf wrapped around the lower half of his face. Frank stood beside him, dressed the same. What's happening? Clara asked. Storm coming. Eli's voice was muffled by the scarf. Bad one. Frank's been watching the sky since midnight. Temperatures dropped 20 degrees in 3 hours, and it's still falling. How bad? Frank answered. Worst I've seen in 10 years, maybe more. The kind that kills cattle by the hundreds if they're not brought close. The herd's in the north pasture, 3 miles out. We're riding out to drive them south, Eli said, closer to the barn. If they're caught in open ground when this hits, we'll lose half of them. Clara looked at the window. It was still dark, but she could hear the wind now, not the steady blow of the past weeks, but something with a voice to it, a low moan that rose and fell. All of you? All of us. Billy, Hank, Charlie, Frank, me. We need every man. How long? If we move fast, 4 hours, maybe 5. Eli pulled on his gloves. Keep the children inside. Keep the fires burning. If the storm hits before we're back, don't open the door for anything. You understand? Anything. Eli. He stopped at the door. Come back, she said. He held her eyes across the kitchen. For one moment, the granite was gone, and what was underneath was just a man who was afraid and brave at the same time. I planned to, he said. They rode out, 5 men on horseback, disappearing into a darkness that was turning gray at the edges. Clara watched from the window until she couldn't see them anymore, and then she watched the empty road for a long time after. Lucy came downstairs at 6. She looked at the window, at Clara's face, and understood immediately. The storm? They went to move the herd. All of them? All of them. Lucy was quiet for a moment. Mama died in a storm like this. Not the same storm, but the same kind. She got sick going out to help the Pratts, and the cold took her before the fever did. Your father knows what he's doing. That's what he said about Mama, too. Clara made breakfast, fed the children, kept the fires burning in every room. The temperature outside was still dropping. -10 by 8 o'clock. -15 by 9. The wind built slowly, then all at once, like a dam breaking, and suddenly the house was under siege. The blizzard hit at 10 in the morning and turned the world white. Clara had never heard anything like it. The wind didn't blow, it screamed. It threw snow against the windows so hard the glass rattled in its frames. It found every crack in the walls and pushed through, thin fingers of cold that no amount of fire could fight. She sealed the cracks with cloth, kept the stove burning hot, moved the children to the kitchen, the warmest room, and kept them close. Thomas read. Rosie played with Mr. Buttons. Lucy helped Clara keep the fire going, feeding wood with the efficiency of a girl who'd survived these storms before. By noon, the men should have been back. They weren't. By 1 o'clock, Clara was pacing. By 2, she was standing at the window, staring into a wall of white that revealed nothing. They found shelter, Lucy said. The line cabin on the North Ridge. Papa built it for exactly this. They're sitting in there waiting it out. You're sure? He knows the land. He'd never get caught in the open. At 3 o'clock, a horse came through the white. One horse, riderless, staggering through drifts that reached its belly, coated in ice, barely able to stand. Clara recognized it. Eli's horse, the big bay with the white blaze on its forehead. No rider. Stay here, Clara said to Lucy. Clara, don't open that door. Stay here. Keep the children warm. She pulled on every piece of clothing she could find. Eli's spare coat over her own, 2 pairs of gloves, a scarf around her face. She opened the door, and the storm hit her like a wall of frozen needles. The horse had collapsed in the yard. Clara reached it, grabbed the reins. The animal was shaking, ice in its mane, exhaustion in its eyes. She pulled it toward the barn by force, opened the barn door, got it inside. Frank was there. He'd come in from the other direction, on foot, his face white with frostbite, his hands clumsy and slow. Blood on his forehead where something had struck him. Frank, where are the others? Billy and Hank and Charlie made the line cabin with the herd. Frank's words were slurred. Hypothermia was taking him. Boss and I got separated. Horse spooked when a branch came down. Threw the boss into a gully about a mile north. Is he alive? He was when I left him, but that was an hour ago and the temperature's still dropping and he can't walk. His legs hurt. Might be broke. Frank swayed on his feet. I tried to carry him. Couldn't. Storm's too strong. Came back for help. You're frozen. You can barely stand. I'll go back. Just need a minute. Frank, you'll die out there. Then I'll die trying. That man saved my life 10 years ago. I'm not leaving him in a ditch. Clara grabbed his shoulders. Where exactly is the gully? North Road, about a mile past the big pine that got struck by lightning 2 years back. There's a bend in the road and a drop-off on the right side. He's down there. I'm going. Miss Aldridge, you can't. You don't know the land. You don't know the road. You can barely walk. If you go back out there, you'll die, and then nobody finds him. Get inside. Get warm. Tell Lucy where I've gone. Ma'am, Frank, please. He looked at her. This woman who'd arrived 8 weeks ago, unable to cook a pancake, standing in a barn in a blizzard, asking him to trust her with his boss's life. The lightning pine's got a split trunk. Can't miss it even in this snow. From there, follow the road north. The bend goes left. The gully's on the right. It's maybe 10 feet deep. He was conscious when I left. I'll find him. Clara took the strongest horse in the barn, a draft horse named Biscuit, that Frank said was too stubborn to spook and too steady to lose its footing. She was terrified of horses. She told Eli that the first morning in his kitchen, standing over burned pancakes, confessing every lie she'd carried west. She mounted Biscuit and rode into the blizzard. The cold was a living thing. It wrapped around her like arms trying to drag her down. The wind tore at her coat, her scarf, tried to rip the reins from her frozen hands. She couldn't see more than 10 feet. The world had been reduced to white and noise and the desperate conviction that somewhere ahead a man was dying in a ditch because he'd gone out to save his cattle. And his cattle weren't worth more than his life. But he'd gone anyway, because that's who Eli Dawson was. She found the lightning pine, split trunk, just like Frank said. She turned north. The road was buried under 3 feet of snow, but Biscuit knew it. The horse plowed forward with the blind determination of an animal that had walked this path 1,000 times. The bend. Left. The drop-off. Right. Clara dismounted and crawled to the edge. Eli! The wind swallowed her voice. She screamed it again. Eli! Eli Dawson! A sound, faint, below her. Not words. A groan. She slid down the gully wall, snow cascading around her, and found him at the bottom. He was half buried. His left leg bent at an angle that made her stomach lurch. His face was white, his lips blue, his eyes closed. Snow covered his chest, his arms, was piling on him like the earth was trying to take him early. Eli! She knelt beside him, brushed the snow from his face. His skin was ice. Eli, open your eyes. Nothing. Eli Dawson, you open your eyes right now. You don't get to die in a ditch, you hear me? You don't get to die before you've given me a chance to answer you. His eyes opened, barely. Slits of blue-gray in a face that was shutting down. Clara, I'm here. You shouldn't be here. Too late. I'm here. Now we're going to get you out of this gully and onto a horse and back to your house where your children are waiting. Can't move. Legs broken. I don't care if both legs are broken. You're moving. Clara, it's too cold. Just go back. Get the children safe. The children are safe. Lucy's with them, and I'm not leaving you here. I'm telling you to go. And I'm telling you no. I said no to Ward Calloway, and I'll say no to you too. You don't get to decide when I walk away. Something that might have been a laugh came out of him. Weak, broken, but there. Stubborn woman. Stubborn man. We're a matched set. Now put your arm around my neck. She got him up. It took everything she had. He was 6 feet of dead weight and frozen muscle, and his leg buckled when he tried to stand, and the scream he muffled against her shoulder was the worst sound Clara had ever heard. "I know," she said. "I know it hurts. Keep moving." 1 step. 2. The gully wall was steep, and the snow was deep, and the wind fought them with every inch. Clara's back screamed, her legs burned. She couldn't feel her hands anymore, but they held on anyway, because they'd learned that on a Boston laundry floor, wringing sheets until her fingers bled, and they were not going to let go now. Biscuit was waiting at the top, patient as stone. Getting Eli onto the horse was the hardest thing Clara had ever done. Harder than burying her mother. Harder than leaving Grace. Harder than standing on that platform, watching Ward drive away. She lifted, and he pulled, and between them, they got him across the saddle like a sack of grain, because sitting upright was impossible with a broken leg. Clara mounted behind him, wrapped one arm around his waist, and took the reins with the other. "Stay awake," she said into his ear. "Talk to me." "About what?" "Anything. Everything. Tell me about Hannah." "You want to hear about my dead wife right now?" "I want to hear your voice. I want to know you're alive. Tell me about the day you met her." Eli talked, broken sentences through chattering teeth, words carried away by the wind, but he talked. About meeting Hannah at a church social in Laramie. About the way she laughed. About proposing in a rainstorm because he couldn't wait for better weather. About Lucy being born on the hottest day in July, and Thomas in a snowstorm not unlike this one, and Rosie in the quiet of a spring morning. Clara guided Biscuit through the white. She couldn't see the road, couldn't see the ranch, could only trust the horse and the sound of Eli's voice, and the arm she kept tight around his waist, holding him in the saddle, holding him in the world. "Clara, I'm here. I love you. Tell me again when you're not dying." "I'm not dying." "You're half frozen with a broken leg in a blizzard. This is not when we have this conversation." "When then?" "When you're sitting in your kitchen with a cup of coffee and all your limbs working." "Is that a yes?" "It's a stay alive and find out." That's motivation enough. The ranch appeared through the white. Not all at once, but in pieces. The barn first, then the house, then the porch where Lucy stood with a lantern, defying every instruction to stay inside, holding up light like a beacon for ships lost at sea. "They're back!" Lucy screamed into the house. "Clara's back! She's got Papa!" They got him inside. Clara, Frank, and Lucy together, carrying him through the door and onto the kitchen table, the same way Clara had laid Thomas on his bed weeks before. This family and their kitchen table, altar and operating room and place where everything that mattered happened. His leg was broken below the knee. Clara could see the angle, feel the displacement through his trouser leg. She'd set Thomas's shoulder from half-remembered reading. She'd stitched cuts and packed wounds and fought fevers with mustard plasters and honey. But she'd never set a broken bone. "Frank, hold him down. Lucy, get the whiskey." "You've done this before?" Frank asked. "No, but I've read about it, and right now, reading is all we've got." She gave Eli the whiskey. He drank, coughed, drank again. His eyes found hers through the pain. "I trust you," he said. "Then hold on to something." She set the bone. The sound it made going back into place was something she'd hear in nightmares for years. Eli didn't scream. He bit through the leather strap Frank put between his teeth and made a sound like an animal trying to be human. And then it was done, and the bone was straight, and Clara splinted it with barrel staves and strips of sheet, and hands that shook so badly she could barely tie the knots. She wrapped him in blankets, built the fire until the kitchen blazed, cleaned the cuts on his face and hands with whiskey, and stitched the deepest one on his forehead with the same careful precision she'd used on Thomas's trousers. Rosie brought Mr. Buttons and tucked him under Eli's arm. "He helped Tommy," she said. "He'll help you too." Eli pulled his daughter close with his one free arm and held her, and over her brown curls, his eyes found Clara, and they were full of something that had nothing to do with gratitude, and everything to do with the conversation they'd started in the kitchen and would finish when he could sit up without passing out. Thomas brought David Copperfield. "I can read to you, if you want." "I'd like that, son." Lucy brought a second blanket, tucked it around his legs without being asked, and when she straightened, she looked at Clara. "You rode a horse," Lucy said. "You're scared of horses." "I am." "But you rode one, in the blizzard, to find him." "Yes." "Why?" Clara looked at this girl who'd lost her mother and built walls and broken them down, and was standing in a kitchen that smelled like blood and whiskey, asking the only question that mattered. "Because some things are worth being scared for." Lucy nodded slowly. Then she did something she'd never done before. She walked to Clara, put her arms around her, and held on. Clara hugged her back, this fierce, wounded, beautiful girl, and over Lucy's shoulder she saw Eli watching them with tears running down his face that he made no effort to hide. The blizzard raged outside. The fire crackled. Thomas read Dickens in his steady voice, and Rosie fell asleep on her father's chest, and Lucy sat beside Clara on the floor with her head on Clara's shoulder. "Clara," Eli said. "Not yet. You're still on the kitchen table. I know where I am, and I know where I want to be, with you, permanently, all of us. Eli Dawson, you are lying on a table with a broken leg and a stuffed rabbit under your arm. This is not a proposal." "The hell it isn't." "Language." "Rosie's asleep." "Lucy's not." "I've heard worse from Frank," Lucy said, not lifting her head from Clara's shoulder. "I love you, Clara Aldridge," Eli said. "I loved you when you burned those first pancakes. I loved you when you told my daughter you were a terrible mother and meant it as kindness. I loved you when you sat up all night with my son and told me the truth I'd been hiding from. I loved you when you refused to be Ward Calloway's second choice. And I love you now, lying on this table with a broken leg and a stuffed rabbit. Because I'm done being afraid, and I'm done pretending, and I'm done building walls that keep out the only thing worth letting in." Clara's vision blurred. She pressed her hand to her mouth. "Say yes," Lucy whispered. "Say yes." Rosie mumbled from Eli's chest, not asleep after all. "Say yes," Thomas said from behind his book, and his voice didn't break once. Clara laughed. It came out wet and broken and full of everything she'd been carrying since Boston. Since her mother's death. Since the train platform. Since the first morning she'd stood in this kitchen and tried to make a pancake and failed, and been given grace instead of judgment. "Yes," she said. "God help me. Yes." Eli reached for her hand. She gave it. His fingers closed around hers the same way they had in the kitchen 3 nights ago. Careful, deliberate, like holding something he'd finally decided he was allowed to keep. "Soon as I can stand," he said. "I'm marrying you." "Soon as you can stand," Clara agreed. "I'll be there." The blizzard howled. The house stood. The fire burned. And 5 people who'd been broken in different ways by different losses sat together in a kitchen that smelled like whiskey and wood smoke and something else. Something harder to name, but impossible to mistake. It smelled like home. Doc Sullivan arrived 4 days after the blizzard broke. He rode in from Rollins on a mule because the roads were still too buried for a wagon. His medical bag strapped to his back, and his face red from cold and irritation. "Elijah Dawson," he said, standing over the cot they'd moved Eli to in the parlor, because Clara refused to let him climb stairs. "You broke your leg, got hypothermia, and let a woman with no medical training set the bone." "She did a good job," Eli said. Doc Sullivan examined the splint, the alignment, the swelling. He pressed and prodded while Eli gripped the cot frame and said nothing, though his jaw went white. "She did a damn good job," Sullivan admitted. "Alignment's near perfect. You'll walk with a limp for a few months, but you'll walk." "Who taught you this?" He looked at Clara. "Nobody. I read a medical text 3 years ago in Boston." "You read a book and said a compound fracture in a blizzard?" "I didn't have a lot of options." Sullivan stared at her. "Ma'am, I've trained surgeons who couldn't do what you did under those conditions. If you ever want to apprentice, I'm serious about the offer." "She's busy," Eli said. "Doing what?" "Marrying me." Sullivan looked from Eli to Clara and back. "Well, that's one way to keep your doctor close." The wedding was set for the first Sunday Eli could stand without crutches. That took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which the snow finally stopped, the roads opened, and Stillwater thawed into something that resembled a functioning town again. Clara spent those weeks in a state she didn't recognize. Happiness. Not the desperate, grasping kind she'd felt reading Ward Calloway's letters, imagining a future built on hope and lies. This was quieter, steadier, the kind of happiness that came from knowing exactly where you stood and choosing to stand there anyway. She cooked, she cleaned, she mended. She read David Copperfield aloud to Thomas while Eli listened from his cot, and Rosie fell asleep on the floor, and Lucy sat in the corner, pretending not to pay attention while absorbing every word. She wrote to Samuel in Baltimore, a long letter, the longest she'd ever written, telling him everything. The rejection, the ranch, the children, Eli. She didn't sugarcoat it or dramatize it, just told the truth, the way she'd learned to do in this house, where truth was the only currency that held its value. Samuel wrote back in 2 weeks. His letter was short, because Samuel had never been one for words. "If he makes you happy, that's enough for me. If he doesn't, I'll come out there and break his other leg. Love, Sam." Clara laughed so hard she cried, and when Eli asked what was funny, she read him the letter, and he said, "I like your brother already. Tell him the wedding's March 15th, and he's welcome if he can make the trip." Samuel couldn't make the trip, but he sent a package that arrived 3 days before the wedding. Inside was their mother's lace shawl, the one Clara had thought was sold years ago to pay rent. Samuel had kept it, hidden it in his toolbox for 15 years, waiting for the day his sister would need something borrowed and something old. Clara held the shawl to her face and breathed in and smelled nothing but cedar and thyme. But in her memory she smelled her mother's soap, and for a moment she was 7 years old again, sitting on her mother's lap, being told that the world was hard, but love made it worth the hardness. The morning of the wedding, Lucy knocked on Clara's door. "Come in." Lucy entered carrying a dress, not new, but beautiful. Blue cotton with white lace at the collar, pressed and clean, with a hem that had been recently altered. "This was Mama's," Lucy said. "Her Sunday dress, the one she wore when she married Papa." Clara's throat closed. "You don't have to wear it," Lucy said quickly. "I just thought she'd want you to have it. She'd want someone to wear it who was going to take care of us. And you do. Take care of us." "Lucy, don't cry. If you cry, I'll cry, and I spent 20 minutes on my hair." Clara took the dress, held it against herself. It was almost the right size, maybe a little loose in the shoulders, but close enough. "It's perfect," Clara said. "It needs a belt. Mama was wider through the middle than you." "I'll use my brown one." "No, use this." Lucy pulled a ribbon from her pocket. Pale blue, satin, the kind of thing a girl might keep in a treasure box for years. It was Mama's hair ribbon, from when she was young. I've been saving it. Lucy, I can't take that. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. There's a difference. Lucy's chin lifted. Stubborn, brave. So much her father's daughter. Mama left a note in her recipe box, saying, "Don't let Papa close himself off." Well, he was closed off for 5 years, and you're the one who opened him back up. I think she'd want you to have the ribbon. Clara pulled Lucy into a hug. The girl didn't stiffen this time. She hugged back, fierce and tight, the way you hold on to something you've decided to keep. "Thank you," Clara whispered. "You're welcome. Now get dressed. Rosie's already eaten half the wedding cake, and Frank's trying to stop her, but he's losing." The ceremony was at 11 in the parlor. Reverend Alderman presided. The ranch hands stood along one wall in clean shirts and combed hair, looking uncomfortable and proud. Frank served as best man, wearing a string tie that he kept tugging at like it was trying to strangle him. Mel Braddock sat in the front row with her handkerchief already out. Beside her, to Clara's surprise, sat Ida Crenshaw, the woman who'd questioned Clara's virtue at church, who'd pushed her niece at Eli for 2 years, who'd whispered and judged and made Clara's first weeks in Stillwater harder than they needed to be. "I wasn't going to invite her," Eli had said the night before. "But you told me once that we can't control what people think. We can only live honestly and let our actions speak." "I said that?" "You said it on the ride home from church. I remember everything you've said to me, Clara. Every word." So Ida was there, sitting stiff-backed and thin-lipped, but there. And when the ceremony was over and Clara walked past her as Mrs. Dawson, Ida caught her hand. "I was wrong about you," Ida said. The words came out like she was passing a kidney stone, but they came out. "Thank you, Mrs. Crenshaw." "Ida, if you're going to be part of this community, we might as well use first names." She paused. "Hannah would have liked you. I knew her well. She had the same stubbornness." "I take that as a compliment." "It was meant as one. Reluctantly." Clara smiled. "I'll take reluctant." But it was the children who made the day. Thomas read a passage he'd chosen himself, from Ruth in the Bible, the same text Reverend Alderman had preached on Clara's first Sunday. "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people." His voice was clear and steady, and he didn't stutter once. And when he finished, he looked at Clara and said, "That's how I feel. About you. About all of this." Eli put his hand on his son's shoulder and squeezed, and Thomas leaned into his father's side, and the gap between them, that had been wide enough to lose a boy in, was closed now, sealed by the understanding that love didn't require a certain shape. It just required showing up. Rosie served as flower girl, which meant she threw handfuls of dried lavender with the force and accuracy of a baseball pitcher, hitting Frank in the face twice and Hank once. She wore her nightgown because she'd refused to change, and both socks were missing, and Mr. Buttons was tucked under her arm. "You look pretty," Rosie told Clara. "Thank you, sweetheart. You look like a mama." The kitchen went quiet. Clara knelt down. "I look like Clara," she said carefully. "Your mama was beautiful and brave, and she loved you very much. I'm not her." "I know, but can I call you Mama anyway?" "Not instead of her, just also?" Clara looked up at Eli. His eyes were bright. He nodded once. "Yes, Rosie, you can call me Mama." "Good." Rosie threw the last of the lavender directly into Billy Price's open mouth and ran off to find more. Lucy didn't speak during the ceremony. She stood beside Clara, quiet and still, her hands clasped in front of her. But when Reverend Alderman pronounced them married, and Eli kissed Clara with his hands on her face and everything he'd been holding back for 5 years in the pressure of his mouth. Lucy stepped forward. "Wait," she said. Everyone looked at her. Lucy reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small piece of paper, folded many times, soft with handling. She unfolded it and held it up, and Clara recognized Hannah's handwriting. "I found this in Mama's Bible last night," Lucy said. "She wrote it when she was sick, before she died. I've been carrying it around, trying to decide whether to read it, and I think today's the day." Her voice shook, but held. It says, "To whoever loves my family after me, thank you for being brave enough to try. Eli will make it difficult. The children will make it harder. But they are worth every hard thing, and if you're reading this, you already know that. Take care of them. Let them take care of you. And tell Eli that I said it's all right to be happy again. He has my permission. He always did." Lucy folded the note. Tears ran down her face, but her voice stayed steady, and Clara understood in that moment that this girl would be fine. Not because the grief would end, but because she'd learned that grief and love could live in the same chest, could share the same space, could exist together without one destroying the other. "That's from Mama," Lucy said. "I wanted her to be here today." "She is," Clara said. "She is here." Eli couldn't speak. He stood with his jaw working and his eyes spilling over, and his broken leg aching, and his whole body shaking with the effort of containing what he felt. Then he pulled Lucy into his arms and held her the way he should have held her for 5 years, tight and complete and without reservation. "I'm sorry," he said into her hair, "for every day I wasn't there, for every time I went to the barn instead of staying, for every wall I built that locked you out." "I know, Papa." "Your mother would be proud of you. I'm proud of you." "I know that too." They held each other while the snow dripped from the eaves outside and the fire crackled, and Frank blew his nose so loud it startled Rosie's imaginary cat. After the ceremony, after the cake that Rosie had only partially destroyed, after the hands had offered their congratulations, and Nell had cried through 3 handkerchiefs, and Ida had managed something approaching warmth, the house grew quiet. The children went to bed. Rosie first, carried up by Eli despite his leg, because some things were worth the pain. Thomas next, with David Copperfield, halfway through now, and planning to start Great Expectations after. Lucy last, pausing at her door. "Clara?" "Yes?" My mother's voice. It was low, like music from another room. She used to sing when she needed bread. Old songs from Missouri that her grandmother taught her. Lucy paused. "I told you I'd tell you about it sometime." "I remember." "Good night, Mama." The word hung in the air between them, fragile and enormous. "You don't have to call me that," Clara whispered. "I know. I want to. Not instead of her, just also." Like Rosie said, Clara nodded because she couldn't speak. Lucy went into her room and closed the door. Gently this time, no slam, no wall going up. Just a girl going to sleep in a house that felt safe again. Eli and Clara sat on the porch that night, despite the cold. His leg was propped on a stool, a blanket across both their laps, coffee laced with whiskey in their hands. "Hannah's note," Eli said. "The one Lucy read." "She knew." "She always knew. Knew me better than I knew myself. Knew I'd try to turn to stone, and knew somebody would have to chisel me back out." "She didn't know it would be me." "Maybe not, but she knew it would be someone." Eli took Clara's hand. "I spent 5 years being faithful to grief. Thought that was the same as being faithful to her. It wasn't. She wanted me to live. She said so in that note. And I was too stubborn and too scared to listen. You're listening now. Because you made me. Because you showed up in my kitchen, unable to cook a pancake, and proceeded to save my son's life and my daughter's heart, and dragged me out of a snowdrift by sheer force of will. Don't forget the biscuits. I make excellent biscuits now. Eli laughed, a real laugh, the kind that came from somewhere deep, the kind that Lucy said she hadn't heard from him in years. Clara Dawson, he said, testing the name. Clara Dawson, she repeated, and it fit like the ring he'd put on her finger that morning. Simple gold, bought from the jeweler in Rollins, with money he'd been saving for new fence posts. He'd chosen her over fence posts. For a rancher, that was practically poetry. Any regrets? He asked. One. I wish I'd met you first. Instead of coming west for Ward Calloway, I wish I'd come west for you. You did come west for me. You just didn't know it yet. Spring arrived in Wyoming the way it always did. Not gently, but all at once. Snow melting in torrents, mud everywhere. The creek behind the ranch swelling until it roared. Clara stood in the yard on the first warm day and felt the sun on her face and thought about the woman she'd been on that train platform in December. She barely recognized her. That woman had been terrified, not just of the rejection, but of everything. Of wanting things, of needing people, of the vulnerability that came with loving someone enough to cross a continent for them. Clara still wanted things, still needed people, still felt vulnerable every morning when she woke up and looked at Eli sleeping beside her and thought, I could lose this. Any day. Any moment. This could be taken. But she'd learned something in this house, from a dead woman's recipe cards and a 12-year-old's fury and a 5-year-old's unconditional trust and a 9-year-old's quiet courage. She'd learned that the fear of losing something was not a reason to refuse having it, that the risk was the price, and the price was worth paying. She planted her garden that spring, the same patch of ground where she imagined Hannah had once grown vegetables, near the kitchen door where the soil was rich and the water was close. Beans, carrots, lettuce, radishes, herbs. She planted them with Rosie beside her, the child's small hands pushing seeds into dirt with the concentration of a surgeon. Will they grow? Rosie asked. If we take care of them. What if they don't? Then we plant again. How many times? As many times as it takes. Lucy helped, not because Clara asked, but because she chose to, kneeling in the mud in a dress Hannah had made, getting dirt under her fingernails and not caring. She was 13 now, growing into the woman she'd become, and the anger that had defined her for 5 years was transforming into something else. Not softness. Lucy would never be soft, but strength with tenderness in it, the way steel could be tempered to bend without breaking. Thomas sat on the porch reading while they worked. He'd finished David Copperfield and moved on to Great Expectations, which he declared better because Pip makes worse decisions. He read passages aloud sometimes, his voice carrying across the yard, clear and steady. The stutter surfaced occasionally when he was tired or nervous, but it no longer owned him. He'd learned that his voice mattered, that the words inside him were worth the effort of getting out, and that the people around him would wait for him to find them. Eli's leg healed. He walked with a limp that winter's cold would make worse for the rest of his life. But he walked. He rode. He worked his ranch with the same steady determination that had built it from nothing. And he came home every evening to a house that smelled like cooking and sounded like children and felt like the thing he'd been afraid to hope for. He came home to Clara. Summer brought new cabs and longer days, and a letter from Ward Calloway that arrived without return address. Clara opened it at the kitchen table while Eli was out. "Dear Miss Aldrich, I heard you married Dawson. I hope you're happy. I'm in Montana now, working a small claim. Vivian is gone. The money is gone. Most things are gone. I'm writing because I owe you an apology I should have given at that train station. You deserved better than what I did. I chose wrong, and I've paid for it every day since. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I see it now, what I threw away. I hope Dawson knows what he has. Yours, Ward Calloway." Clara read the letter twice. Then she folded it and put it in the stove and watched it burn. She didn't feel satisfaction, didn't feel vindication. Felt something closer to compassion for a man who'd learned too late that character mattered more than beauty, that honesty outlasted charm, that the woman you rejected on a train platform might have been the best thing that ever almost happened to you. She didn't tell Eli about the letter, not because it was a secret, but because it was finished. Ward Calloway was a chapter in a book she'd closed, and the story she was living now had nothing to do with him. That fall, Clara told Eli she was pregnant. They were sitting on the porch after the children were asleep, the same spot where they always ended their days. And she said it plainly, because that was how they spoke to each other. "I'm carrying a child." Eli's hand tightened on hers. She felt the tremor go through him. Fear, the old fear, the one that lived in his bones, the one that whispered, "Hannah died this way." "I'm scared," he said. "I know. So am I. Last time, I'm not Hannah, and this isn't last time. This is now." He turned to face her, the blue-gray eyes that had looked at her from the train station, from across the kitchen, from the bottom of a frozen gully, now looking at her with everything he had. Love, fear, hope, the understanding that life offered no guarantees and asked you to show up anyway. "We'll be all right," Clara said. "All 5 of us. All 6 now." "You can't know that." "No, but I can choose to believe it. And so can you." He pulled her close, held her against his chest, where she could hear his heartbeat, steady as it had always been, the heart of a man who'd lost everything and found the courage to love again. 6, he said. I like the sound of that. The baby was born in May, on a morning when the wildflowers had just begun to open and the mountains were still capped with snow. A girl. Dark hair like Eli's, gray-green eyes that couldn't decide whose color they wanted to be. They named her Hope. Lucy held her first, sat in the rocking chair that Hannah had nursed 3 babies in, and held this new sister with hands that were gentle and sure, and didn't shake at all. "She's so small," Lucy whispered. "You were smaller," Eli said. "Was I?" "Smallest thing I'd ever seen. Your mother said you looked like an angry potato." Lucy laughed, and cried, and held the baby closer. Thomas touched Hope's hand with one finger, and when the tiny fist closed around it, his face broke open with wonder. "She's strong." "She comes from strong people," Clara said. Rosie, now 6, peered into the bundle with enormous eyes. "She doesn't have socks on." "She's a baby, Rosie. Babies don't wear socks." "I don't wear socks either." We have that in common. In the parlor, Clara had hung 2 photographs side by side. One of Hannah, young and smiling, taken before the children, before the illness, when the future was still a promise. One of Clara on her wedding day, wearing Hannah's dress, holding Hannah's ribbon, standing beside the man they'd both loved in different seasons of his life. 2 women, 2 stories, both woven into the fabric of this family, this house, this piece of Wyoming that had seen so much loss and refused to stop growing. Eli found Clara standing in front of those photographs one evening, Hope asleep in her arms. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That she saved us both. Hannah. Her recipe cards taught me to cook. Her note taught me to fight for you. Her dress married me to you. Her daughter accepted me because Hannah raised a girl brave enough to let go of anger and choose love instead." "She'd be glad," Eli said. "She'd be so glad." "I know." He put his arm around her, and they stood together, the baby between them, looking at the photograph of a woman who'd loved this family first and left behind just enough breadcrumbs for the woman who'd love them next. Years passed the way years do on a ranch, measured in seasons and calves and children who grew taller when you weren't watching. Lucy became a teacher. Thomas became a writer. Rosie became a doctor, the first woman doctor in 3 counties, because a 5-year-old who'd watched Clara set a broken leg in a blizzard had decided right then what she wanted to be. Hope grew up hearing the story. Every child in the Dawson family grew up hearing it, because Clara told it the way her mother had told her stories, sitting by the fire on winter nights with the wind outside and the warmth inside, and the knowledge that every story worth telling started with something breaking. "Tell us about the train," Rosie's daughter would say years later. "Tell us about the pancakes," Thomas's son would add. "Tell us about the blizzard," Hope would whisper, because the blizzard was her favorite part. The part where her mother rode a horse she was terrified of, into a storm that could have killed her, to save the man she loved. And Clara would tell it, all of it, the platform, the rejection, the crawling. The man with blue-gray eyes who picked up her valise and said, "Can you learn?" The burned pancakes and the dead woman's recipe cards, and the girl who slammed doors, and the boy who stuttered, and the child who grabbed her hand, and the foreman who thought everything was the finest thing he'd ever eaten. She told them about Ward Calloway, too, not with bitterness, with the clear-eyed understanding that some rejections are redirections, that the man who walks away sometimes does you the greatest kindness of your life by leaving room for the right man to walk in. She told them about Hannah, always about Hannah, because Hannah was part of this story too, the invisible thread that held it all together, the woman who'd loved first and best and left behind a note that said, "Don't let him close himself off." Clara didn't let him. Not once. Not ever. For 41 years of marriage, she kept that promise to a woman she'd never met. And Eli kept his promise to stay present, to stay open, to choose love over safety every single day, even when it was terrifying, especially when it was terrifying. He died at 80, in the bed they'd shared for 4 decades, with Clara's hand in his, and their children and grandchildren filling the house with the noise and life that Hannah had dreamed of and Clara had built. His last words were, "You were worth every scared moment." Clara lived 3 more years, long enough to see Hope graduate from medical school, long enough to hold her first great-grandchild, long enough to sit on the porch of Copper Ridge Ranch on a winter evening and watch the snow fall, and remember the day she'd arrived with $14 and a valise held together with twine and a heart that had been broken before it had even learned what it was breaking for. On the mantel in the parlor, 3 photographs hung side by side now. Hannah, young and smiling. Clara on her wedding day. And the whole family, taken 15 years after the wedding. Everyone on the front porch, 5 children and 2 parents. And Frank Harlow photobombing from behind a pillar. And Mr. Buttons tucked under Rosie's arm, because some things you never outgrow. Beneath the photographs, in a glass case, sat Hannah's recipe box. 30 recipe cards and 2 notes. The one Lucy had read at the wedding, and the one Clara had found that first week, tucked under the sourdough bread. Don't let him close himself off. She never did. The mail-order bride never arrived at her intended destination. She arrived instead at the place she was always meant to be. Not because fate was kind, but because a woman on her knees on a frozen platform made a choice. She chose to stand up. She chose to take the job. She chose to learn, to stay, to fight, to love, to ride a horse she was terrified of into a blizzard for a man who was worth being scared for. That choice built a ranch, a family, a legacy that lasted 6 generations and counting. It built a home, and it proved, once and for all, that the life you plan is never as strong as the life you build from the wreckage of the plan that failed. That the love you chase across a continent in letters is never as real as the love you find standing in a kitchen at 4 a.m, burning pancakes, telling the truth, and being told, "That's enough. You're enough. Stay." She stayed.